Hello, everybody. My name is Francisco Aguiñiga Garcia, and welcome to my final presentation. So, I'm going to be talking about my technical report, and the topic that I chose to write about was personality theory and its potential uses. Um, this was for a class for Texas A&M University Kingsville for English 2374, also known as Professional Communications, which is basically technical writing. So I'll first be starting off with the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and then moving on to cognitive functions, and then the Enneagram, and then the correlation between the systems, and the benefits of using both systems together, and I'll be wrapping everything up in a conclusion. So first, the Myers-Briggs type indicator. So it's also known as the MBTI, or the 16 personalities. If you're somewhat familiar with personality in the internet, you're probably familiar with the 16 personalities test. Uh, Personally, I think the test is inaccurate because it tests you on each of the letters rather than on the each cognitive function and finding out your function stack order. I'll explain all of that further along the PowerPoint or presentation. So first, let's move on to the cognitive functions. So you have four main cognitive functions basically, and those divide into two of its subtypes, right? So you have intuition, sensing, ethics, and logic. So you have two perceiving functions and you have two judging functions, right? Your two perceiving functions would be intuition and sensing, and your two judging functions would be ethics and logic. So your perceiving functions are basically how you view the world and how you absorb information, right? And your judging functions is how you process things. So intuition is a little more abstract. It has like ideas, possibilities, and that sort of potential. And for sensing, it's literally just your senses, like your sight, your touch, your hearing, your smell, your five senses, right? Or more if you have more. Your ethics is pretty self-explanatory. It's basically ethics. And logic, again, is pretty self-explanatory. So, yes, your ethics and your logic are your processing functions. So that's what you use to process information through either your ethics or your logic. And now these divide into two subtypes, right? So you have introverted intuition and extroverted intuition. You have introverted sensing, you have extroverted sensing. And likewise for ethics and logic. So that makes 8 in total. And let's start talking about each function individually. So for intuition, on the left you have extroverted intuition, and on the right you have introverted intuition. And the left and right pattern is going to follow through all the functions. So for extroverted intuition, it usually takes an initial idea and it comes up with all these ideas or possibilities that one thing can stem from, right? Usually, uh, people with this dominant trait, like ENTPs and ENFPs, and we'll talk about what a dominant function is. Usually, these people uh, are very quick to come up with ideas, right? And all of these ideas are supported by their other functions, and I'll explain that in a bit as well. So, for introverted intuition, what people with introverted intuition as their dominant function like to do, they like to have everything ready. They understand, or like in my picture, right? Take all the data, and once they have all of the pieces of the puzzle, they can come up with conclusions, and they try to look for the most possible outcome, right? So let's move on to sensing. So uh, extroverted sensing, if they come to roadblocks or things like that, they're usually quicker to adapt and overcome those things. They are more in tune with their surroundings. So they are uh, quick on their feet in terms of like moving, even with their body. They're people like ESTPs and ESFPs. They're they have better control, like kinetic control of their body as well. Not saying that the other personalities don't, because we can all move our bodies, right? But people specifically with extroverted sensing are usually more in tune with their physical body, or even introverted sensing. So introverted sensing, unlike extroverted sensing, if they come to a block rather than adapting, they like to try to impose change or better it, basically. So they, if you can see the arrows, right, how it's going up and then going down, trying to impose change and being different, right? So for ethics, we have extroverted ethics and we have introverted ethics, right? So extroverted ethics is basically the ethics of other people, what they believe in. It includes their feelings and everything like that. And for introverted ethics, that's what you believe in, your feelings and things like that. So there's a common misconception that people with extroverted ethics are more selfless, and people with introverted ethics are more selfish. That's not the case. Both people with both, or either function higher in their stack, right, are just as capable of empathy and sympathy. However, their preference just goes to either extroverted ethics or introverted ethics. So, lastly, for logic, the extroverted logic, usually it's more of taking action and doing things, right? While introverted logic is more of like analysis. An example I've heard before is if you gave someone with extroverted logic, sorry, a car engine, they would the first thing that they would do is like, what can I do with this, right? I try to find ways to use it and things like that, right? However, a person with introverted logic, they would, whenever you give them the car engine, they're like, what? How does this work? And they would try to understand. They would like to take it apart and understand what each component does and how it all functions together. So it doesn't mean that people with introverted logic are lazy and do nothing about it, and it doesn't mean that people with extroverted logic do things without thinking. They both complement each other. It's a matter of preference, just like in ethics, right? So now moving on to the function stacks. As I mentioned previously, there's dominant functions, which is basically your first function, right? And your second function is called the auxiliary. The third is tertiary, and your fourth function is known as your inferior function. Myers-Briggs only uses the first four functions. However, there's other systems like socionics that uses all eight functions. Also, Myers-Briggs refers to ethics and logic as feeling and thinking. However, socionics refers to them as ethics and logic. I think it's a little more accurate since it's broader than just feelings and thinking. It encompasses more of the same topic. So, yes. So in the cognitive functions, whenever you're creating a function stack, or how function stacks work more, is the first function is going to be either introverted or extroverted, and whatever your first function is, the second function is going to be the opposite of it. So if your first function is introverted, your second function is going to be extroverted. And the same thing is going to happen for perception and judging. So if your first function is a perceiving function, your second function is going to be a judging function. You cannot have two perception functions right next to each other, and you cannot have two introverted or extroverted functions next to each other. So the example that I have here is of an INTJ with introverted intuition as their first function, with extroverted logic or extroverted thinking as their auxiliary. Their tertiary is introverted ethics, and their inferior is extroverted sensing. So I explained how to derive the first two functions, but to get the third function, you basically take the opposite. You keep, if you're if your second function is a judging function, your third function will also be the judging function. It'll just be the other opposite one. So in this case, right, you have extroverted thinking. So it'll in the opposite of complete opposite of that would be introverted feeling. And likewise, if let's say you had extroverted sensing as your second function, your third function would be introverted intuition. And for the last four functions, it would be your same functions in the same order, but just opposite. So opposite in terms of introversion or extroversion. So if you have introverted intuition as your first function, your fifth function is going to be extroverted intuition. I hope I said that right. So now let's move on to the Enneagram. So the Enneagram is composed of 9 types. As you can see in the picture, right, we have the, so usually basically what the Enneagrams tries to explain is your core motivations and your core fears, basically what drives you. So Myers-Briggs explains more of how you perceive information and how you process it, and the Enneagram is more of what drives you, right? So for like example, type 1s, they're perfectionistic. They don't like to be wrong. They like to be right, and they like to also be good. They don't like to be considered evil and things like that. Type 2s, their drive is like love, feeling love, and helping others feel loved, right? Type 3s are more of like achievers, as it says in the PowerPoint, right? They're very success driven. Type 4s, their drive is individuality. Type 5s, their drive is intellect, knowledge, and type 6s is loyalty, right? And security, mainly security. For type 7s, it's basically fun. If something isn't fun, they most likely will not do it, right? Type 8s, they are driven by control or their fear of being controlled or not having control. And for type 9s, they like harmony between everybody. So they'll try to find common ground in like arguments and things like that, right? So now let's move on to the benefits, or I'm sorry, the correlation between the systems. So as you can see in this chart, it basically shows a percentage in a study of what personalities are more inclined to being an Enneagram type. So also an interesting thing I found was that your personality of Myers-Briggs, that's something you're born with. You cannot change your personality, because a lot of people, they think, oh, how you're raised depends on your personality, and it's partially true. Your Enneagram is what is developed as a child. So if you grew up, for example, with a low income and no security in that sense, you're most likely a type 6. And actually, most people in the world are type 6s. Probably because of that, or there's probably other insecurities. If you needed, for example, love a lot when you were a kid, you're most likely a type 2. And so on and so forth. It doesn't matter your personality and to your Enneagram, basically. So, like for example, an INTJ can be any type of the Enneagram, just because they're, for example, it's a stereotype, right? That INTJs don't really like people. Doesn't mean they can't be a type 2, right? So once you unite both of these systems together, you're able to understand both what drives the person and how they perceive things. And moving to the benefits, this is obviously very beneficial in terms of team efforts, because let's say you want to get a group project done, right? And you're going to need someone who understands everything very well. So most likely you're going to get someone with TI higher up in their function stack order, right? So because they understand things. The problem is they don't really apply it much, or they're maybe so focused on understanding it that they don't really apply it. So you can have someone with TE to complement for the lack of, or not the lack of, but basically strengthen the thinking there. Let's say you need someone to help bring the group together. You could bring someone with a high extroverted feeling, or type 9 who likes harmony in case there's an argument or something like that. A type 9 will try to mediate and cool things down, right? So it's very great for group benefits if you're able to type everybody accurately as well. Uh, Usually those online assessments are not very accurate. It's best to just read each function or personality type and kind of start to deduce what falls into, or what you fall into rather. For Enneagram, the easiest way to know your Enneagram type is just read the core fears, and whichever is usually more like embarrassing kind of, that's usually your type. And if you still can't find out after that, you can read your core motivations and just kind of read more into it if you still can't find out, right? So another benefit is others could help you better. Psychologists and counselors and psychiatrists actually use these systems, not just these systems, right? But they use the personality typing systems to understand how to help their patients better. Since not everybody is the same, let's say for example, actually, I don't think an example would pretty be good, but since not everyone is the same, not everything will work the same for one person. And in case like a family member dies, for example, for someone, uh, some people, they just need to talk about it. Others, they just need to talk with someone, not about it, but just kind of change the subject and things like that, right? So overall, it just helps you understand, or it helps whoever's helping you understand you better, right? And it's also important for growth and understanding, because there is a function in the function stacks called the polar function, which is basically your third function but in reverse. So like if we go back to the INTJ, they have introverted feeling. So the reverse of that is extroverted feeling. So that's their polar function. In socionics is known as a polar function. And what that means is basically is their weakest function naturally. So they're naturally less inclined to use that function. And by knowing that, rather than using it as an excuse like, oh, I'm not good with people, so why should I try, they can actually grow and understand better. Like, okay, I'm naturally not good at understanding people, or like seeing where they're come from, basically. So they know what to work on and overall grow better, right? So, as in conclusion, right, the yes, personality typing is very broad, and there's a lot of things that to take into account, right? But once you understand at least the basics of it, it'll bring a lot of benefits to team efforts, or helping yourself or helping others. So overall, I would think it's a great system to use in your daily life. Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram are not the only typing systems that are out there. I put 4 examples there. The top left is like the big 5. The top right is the DISC system, DISC, not K. And then there's the attitudinal psyche, as well as the socionics, because socionics is basically the same as MBTI, but they also divide the 16 personalities in alpha, beta, gamma, and the delta groups, and it's a little more, I would say, like scientific. But yes, there are different functions, or I'm sorry, different typing systems that you could use to better this. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Here's my list of references from my report, as well as some that I used for the presentation. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it again, and thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye bye.